Joseph, what's in your mouth right now?
It's a piece of wood.
Piece of wood from what?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but it's something with tannic acid, and I seem to recall that it was sweet chestnut. While here at the Bushcraft show in the UK, we got to see Ben Orford giving a sharpening demonstration, which is cool in its own right. It's about maintaining your tools, but it's also cool because he showed how to sharpen a crooked knife used for spoon carving and making bowls.
When it comes to sharpening, we'll have a little look at this one first. You'll probably see that mine's gone a little bit blue because I was carving some of that sweet chestnut earlier today, and the tannin in the sweet chestnut reacts with the carbon steel and it will go blue basically. So it needs a bit of a clean up. If you leave the tannin on your tools, you'll find that it will start to corrode the tool as well. So it's good to do a bit of maintenance if you've been using something with tannic acid in it. The first thing I normally do before I sharpen my knife, if you've got any corrosion on, say the tang, or any sort of oxidation on your rivets and things like that, I like to use these little Gary Flex blocks. So these are a rubber impregnated or grit impregnated rubber block basically, so you can use them as a very fine abrasive, and they're perfect for cleaning any corrosion off the tang of your knife. And because they're sort of rubber, they won't mark your handle material. So if you want to clean up any of the blade but without marking your handle, then these are absolutely perfect, and they polish up your brass real nice. And if you want to use it on the blade, you can do. You just need to check which direction the scratch pattern of your blade is running. So most knives will run from the handle to the tip in a sort of straight scratch pattern. This is an early knife that I made, and it actually runs 90 degrees to the blade, so I'm actually going to go back and forth like this, and that cleans up the blade. Now you might think that you can use sandpaper, but if you use sandpaper on your knife, you'll find that you'll put these funny little scratch marks on the actual steel, which we call fish hooks, where you sort of swirl back and forth. If you just use one of these rubber blocks, you'll find that it doesn't leave those marks. So I do that first, because obviously you don't want to be rubbing your fingers close to the cutting edge if you've just put a razor sharp edge on your knife. So any cleanup, do it at this stage before you start sharpening. Technique wise, doesn't matter what you're using. You can use diamond stones, you can use oil stones, you can use sandpaper. So we use wet and dry sandpaper quite often for sharpening, and we'll show you that in a little bit when we're doing the crook knives. The harder the tool, the harder the steel, the more coarse you'll need to start with if it's very dull. So the medium that I like to use for sharpening is Japanese water stones. Wow, that water's actually quite warm in that sun today. Now you can use Japanese water stones that are 1 grit. So this is a medium grit stone with a fancy little foot sort of holder, and that's very good to use. There's nothing wrong with using that. Often when I'm travelling around, I'm trying to sort of conserve a little bit of weight, so I like to use these combination stones. So this is a combination of 1,000 grit one side and 6,000 grit on the other. So those are our 2 grits that we need to sharpen with. The 1,000 grit will be coarse enough to remove material fairly fast, and then the 6,000 grit is going to put our final polished edge on it. That's going to leave a really nice finish on there. If your edge is still very shiny and you want to be able to see where you're making contact with the stone, before you start, get your marker pen and just colour in that bevel, and that's really going to help show you where you're removing steel from. You don't need to colour the whole knife in, just the actual cutting edge itself. And this is what we call a sort of typical Scandi grind on this knife. So it's one flat round bevel, and it makes a much easier job of sharpening because of that grind. Because when I lay this onto the stone, because there's such a big wide bevel, I can feel exactly when it makes contact with the stone. And you guys that are sitting quite close to the front, you can probably see when I tilt the knife, can you see how it squirts the water out? And that's a good indicator. That means that I'm dead flat on that stone now. First section that I'm going to use is this straight section, straight from the handle before it starts to turn. And I'm going to place the knife 90 degrees to the stone, so dead square to the stone, and I'm going to push back and forth like so. And after a few passes, I lift it off the stone, and you can see it's removed all the pen all in one go. and it's removed it all the way from the cutting edge right through to the back of the bevel. If I hadn't held quite the right angle and I tilted it too far forward, it would only remove pen from the very front of the bevel, and vice versa, if I had have held it too flat, it would have only removed pen from the back of the bevel. So looking at that pen and changing the pitch of my hand and my tool, my knife, I can change the angle to make sure that I remove all the steel all in one go. And that's what we want to try and do. We want to try and maintain that flat bevel. We don't want to try and round it. It's very tempting to sharpen the tool just by tilting that angle ever such slightly more, and it'll get sharp really quick, but it'll put a secondary bevel on there, and the next time you sharpen you'll have to tilt a bit more and more, and before you know it you've got a very obtuse cutting edge, and it won't really like to cut through anything even if it is sharp. Big trick with a crook knife, and this is where it normally throws people, is it's normally single beveled, so it's only got a bevel on one side and normally on the outside, and dead flat on the inside, and also it's curved. It's very tricky if you're trying to use this crook knife on a bench stone, because you're getting very little response because there's very little amount of bevel actually touching the stone. So personally what I like to do is use those sharpening sticks that I showed you. So these are 2 bits of wood. I've normally got 3 grits of paper with me, so if it's very dull I've got a 240 grit which will really hog off material, and then I've got a 400 grit, and then I've got a 1200 grit which is our finest medium, and that puts a really nice fine edge on there. And all I do is I wrap it round a piece of wood, and these have got radiused edges on there which are about 8mm in thickness, with a nice rounded corner that will allow me to get onto the inside face of this hook tool, and then a flat side so that I can do the outside bevel. Now, having said that there's only one bevel on this crook knife and the inside is flat, you still have to treat that inside face as a cutting edge, as a bevel, but obviously it's dead flat, it's just a different angle to the other ones. So you've still got to hone the inside. If you want to, you can use the same pen and colour in that bevel just so that you can make sure you're making contact to the right places. If you've been carving sweet chestnut, again, you probably don't need to because it might have gone blue. And I sometimes like to use my strop, and I lay that on my bench. Sometimes flip it, in fact I will. I'll lay this bit of paper down so I don't get it dirty. And all that does is it gives me a little bit of clearance so that I don't keep skinning my knuckles on my workbench. So lay your crook knife on a little block just so that it lifts it off the bench. Using the curved surface, first task I'm going to do is I'm going to polish the inside face of my hook tool. Because it's single beveled and you're using it, if the edge folds, it will always fold over onto that inside face. So the first thing to do is polish off the inside, remove any burr. So we'll do a few passes on there. And you'll notice that I'm sweeping it round, keeping the stick moving pretty much in the same arc, but I'm rotating the crook knife round, just like so. And I'm using that bit of marking from the sweet chestnut to see where I'm making contact with the steel, making sure that I'm not changing that angle too much and putting a secondary bevel on the inside, keeping it nice and flat. And then the trick now is to do that outside bevel. Now we were using the radiused edge before, I'm now going to use the flat surface, and I'm going to hold it closer to my body, and the older I get and the worse my eyes get, the closer it gets to my nose so I can see exactly what I'm doing. And I'm going to change the angle of this stick just by changing the pitch of my wrist, and I'm going to be looking at it and making sure that I'm removing all that pen from the bevel. This, if anything, can be slightly convexed because that will help it slide through the wood, but you don't want to put on that secondary bevel. So just keep an eye on that pen, change the angle as you need to, making sure that I'm only pushing away with the sandpaper, I'm not drawing it because it will just cut the paper. And as soon as I go around that bend, I flip it round, and now I'm going to be drawing it away from the cutting edge again so I can see what I'm doing. And it won't take many passes just to polish that edge up. You can see we've removed all that pen now. And depending on how dull it is, you might need to do 2 or 3 passes with different grits and clean up that inside surface.
Just a bit, yeah.
And then I've got the same leather, slightly thinner, fluffy side on the outside that we've charged with the Tormek paste, and we can then do the same process and just polish that inside face. So this is really important that we get these as shiny as possible, because carving spoons, you want a really sharp edge because you're going to leave a really nice smooth finish on your spoon, but also you want this to just glide through the wood, so you're hardly putting any effort into actually swinging the tool through the wood. So that's the kind of level of sharp you want even on your little cookie.
Over the course of the sharpening demonstration, Ben used a couple of high-grade tools, like a diamond whetstone, but the cool thing about the crook knife sharpening demonstration was that he was using strips of wood with rounded corners covered in sandpaper. Now that's something I could probably make at home. I like it. It was good and basic.
Simplicity in its stripped back nature, so a bit of poplar. Obviously when I'm packing this down, they're dead simple. You just, as long as it doesn't get rained on, simple tenon, just in a simple hole, no spanners required, and then you've got this swinging arm which is sort of fully adjustable, so that slides in like so, and you've got different. So you can adjust height and also how far forward. Yeah, so this is kind of designed so children and short-legged people can use it as well. So you've got 2 footrests, so I tend to use the lower one, but you've got a higher one as well.
And you've got 3 vertical holes on that attachment and then 3 horizontal holes on the bench, so you have quite a bit of flexibility, 9 points of flexibility.
A lot of flexibility. Normally I use wooden pegs, but they tend to get a bit broken in the truck, so we've got screws on here today. Ideally you want asymmetric triangle, so 3 different size sort of edges to it. Okay. So you can turn this to obviously change the pitch, the distance, so then you can rotate it 3 times, 3 different heights. Yeah, this you can do with some longer screws really, but that just helps it spit out. This helps if it's a piece of softwood, so that when you clamp a piece of wood in there, it doesn't slide. If this is hardwood, like ash or hickory or something, it gets very shiny and hard, and the wood slips. Okay. So a little bit of this. I'll get a slightly smaller bit of wood.
Does that rotate at all? It doesn't seem to.
No, it's flat on the bottom.
It's flat?
Yeah, so it's...
Huh, I'm curious how they...
You can see that.
Gotcha.
But dead simple. Yeah, ideally, in the perfect world, this would rotate. This is swollen up a little bit. So
is that so that you can match that up with the...
Yeah, so if you're carving curved things, sometimes it's nice that curved edge sits in the recess.
Yeah, there you go.
Then you've got a flat edge for like flat pieces, and then if you're working on, say, like spatulas that are a thin piece, they sit in that little notch. Okay. So it's kind of nice if this rotates.
Is that just because it's swollen up over time?
Yeah, it's because it gets a little bit neglected and left out in the rain and things like that. So there you go, that sort of spins. So that ideally wants to be able to turn all the way, so you can choose what sort of section you're working on. Most of the time I'm working on, I'm mostly working on sort of flat sections, so it sort of fits in there quite nicely. And then draw knife in, once you've got it in there, I'd normally do a little bit of axe work to make it a little bit thinner. But the mechanics that you've got, I mean the force is quite unbelievable. The amount of effort that it takes to push there, the amount of leverage you get that holds that so firm. And then once you've got it held in there, you've got the draw knife. And it's so quick and easy to manipulate. What I say to people is, if you imagine how much time when you're working in a conventional woodwork shop using a vise, you'd spend more time changing the vise than you would be working wood. Yeah. So it's like instant. As soon as you want to change it, you just let go with your feet. Now this is a European shave horse design. Okay. So in Europe you'll see mostly like this. In the States, there is more of a tradition of what they call a dumb-head horse. So the arms sort of come through the middle of the body of the horse rather than on the outside. Okay. And that's more common from sort of Scandinavia and say more German and Austrian and stuff like that. Interesting. And that sort of went over to the States. I don't know why that sort of became a sort of precedent, but that's how it seemed to happen over there. With the draw knife itself, it helps if you skew the blade slightly when you're using it.
I noticed that you were using a slicing knife.
Yeah. You can use it like this. It's just a little bit more inefficient.
You get a slicing motion,
yeah.
Right? Is that the idea?
Yeah. It's like, I always say to people, that's when you think of a French guillotine. Yeah. They weren't straight, they were all on the angle, so as it came down, it just super efficient then. And you get these lovely curly shavings coming off.
I was going to say those look quite thin and delicate. It's amazing to me that you can take the material off in that fine of a way.
It's quite amazing, really, how versatile it is. So if I was making a chair leg or something, or a tenon, I tend to keep it
roughly round octagonal.
Yeah, I tend to work on facets.
Okay.
People try and aim for a circle straight away, and it's quite hard to visualise. Whereas if you work on a hexagon and you try and make each one of these sides roughly the same width, you'll keep it true, and it's almost a circle straight away. Then all you have to do then to make it truly round, just knock off those corners. So if I knock off those corners real quick, you've almost got a perfect circle without even thinking about it.
That is amazing.
And the smell that you get off it. This is all that tannic here. Can you get that on camera?
Yeah. Well, I can't get the smell, but I can. It's astounding to me how thin that is.
Yeah, it is. It's like cooking.
Yeah. It's very vinegary. That's that tannic acid.
Well, it's
so,
true.
like Will would be using that kind of acid in materials for tanning his hides and things like that. So
we're taking the wood chips from the guy doing the woodwork.
or the bark or whatever. Yeah. The safety in it is basically
The two-handed grip.
Yeah. Got it 2 hands. You can't cut yourself. As soon as you let go of it, that's when you can do yourself some damage. I've seen people sort of knock it on their knee and things like that. So as soon as you got it with 2 hands, you won't cut yourself.
That's super cool.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Thank you. And then, is this just carved for comfort?
Yeah, for comfort. And stop you sliding. Because as you're pushing with your feet, it stops you just spitting off the back.
That makes sense.
And some people carve it bigger, depending on the size of their
Posterior?
posterior.
Okay, so we've got this. It's gripping it. So. I'm going really gently. Let's give that
I don't want to slice your gut open today.
No, it wasn't on my list of things to do today.
Tomorrow.
Maybe. Although, frankly, I'm not going to put it on the to-do list either.
It's a carpenter's harakiri.
One of those delightful surprises that I've heard so much about.
That's the tannic acid, the bluing, which is also going to corrode and degrade the blade, which is why you want to oil these things, wash them, and sharpen them. Whoa, that scares you just a little, right?
Yeah. Sharp edge coming toward you fast?
Yeah. It's easier to break than I expected. You know, I kind of have a reasonable amount of confidence that I can stop that thing before it hits me, even when I'm coming through this last section. Whoa, that's making me just a little more nervous. Not 1 Joseph 0. Actually, well, I should say not 1 Joseph 1, because I've been doing a good job on this. You know, but I'm a little loath to have something that sharp coming at me at that kind of speed. Whoa! Spooks you just a little. Joseph, what's in your mouth right now?
It's a piece of wood.
Piece of wood from what?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but it's something with tannic acid, and I seem to recall that it was sweet chestnut. Man, that's an interesting flavor. It's slightly vinegary.
Did you catch, when I was tasting it, I got kind of a sweet tang too. Do you get that a little bit?
Yeah, it's almost... Okay, it's got a stronger smell than flavor, but that smell is... It's nice. I'm chewing on wood and enjoying it. What is wrong with me? I've enjoyed Ben Orford's videos for quite a while on how to take care of knives, on how to use a spring pull lathe, and many other topics related to bushcraft. And actually meeting him and getting to learn how to use a draw knife with him was extremely cool. If you want to see more of his videos, please hit the link below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe below. We look forward to seeing you next time.